19th episode, we travel to the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City and sit down and talk with Erin McCarthy, who's working as a program manager for Trinity Place Shelter. Trinity Place Shelter helps homeless lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer LGBTQ youth and young adults ranging from 18 to 24 in New York City. Today, Erin shares with us how their mission of working with their residents to safely transition them out of the shelter system and grow up into independent, positive, and productive adults has been affected by the coronavirus. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi and Water. Hey Erin, how are you? Welcome to Wi-Fi and Water.
Hey there, thanks so much for having me.
It is a warm, muggy September evening.
Gotta love it with that North Shore wind. Gotta love it.
I like that you know about the North Shore wind. It does get quite windy, and sometimes when I'm not like maybe thinking about what's going on in the rest of the world. I'm just like walking around. I'm like, there's a lot of wind, and I'm like, oh wait, that's because there's a crazy hurricane in Florida, and you totally feel it. It does happen. So
definitely. I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful country out there, over there on the coast, on the North Shore. I envy you.
It is. Well, it's like the grass is always greener, because I would love to be able to spend more time in New York City. I miss it a lot. I miss the hustle and bustle. What's New York City look like now? And well, before we get into that, I guess I should say Erin works for Trinity Place Shelter, and she is on tonight to really talk about what that looks like. And especially, I mean, during COVID, how has it changed Trinity Place's ability to offer its services to the demographic which it works with, which is 18 to 24 youth in the LGBTQ community. So how does COVID, throw a wrench into that?
Well, it completely threw out our playbook. Yeah. So basically, my name's Erin. My pronouns are they, them, and I have been working throughout the entire pandemic at a homeless shelter on the Upper West Side. I live in Brooklyn on the 4 train. So I have been riding the train all throughout the pandemic, 1, 2, 3, and the 4, 5, 6 lines. So the Manhattan lines. And our operation has changed because our shelter is set up so that residents are out during the day. Trinity Place Shelter has a much higher success rate with getting folks into better circumstances. And that has a lot to do with our care coordination with the existing systems that our residents rely on. Some of those systems come from organizations like Streetworks or the California Center, The Door. But a lot of those, in fact, all of those day programs are currently shuttered. So what that meant for us is that we now had to have 24-hour services for our residents, where before they were out of the house between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So it's definitely been a shift in dynamic. It's been a shift in staffing patterns. It's been a shift in the rules and expectations for our residents as well. And as you said, we're working with 18 to 24-year-olds. So luckily, they're not really the target demographic for COVID. I'm happy to report that we haven't had a case at the shelter. And yet, they're at a place in their life where it's really hard to sit still, where they really want to be out there moving and shaking and doing the hard work of exiting homelessness. So yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment for everybody.
So the old hours used to be, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., get out there, whether it's working, volunteering, or doing something else, adding value to the community, being able to grow, whatever that looks like, personal development, professional development. And then at night, come back at 8, we've got a warm meal, you can get a shower, you can put your stuff away, relax, feel safe, and, get some sleep, get some rest. And that's what the old dynamic. And so now with the new dynamic, you're saying now you're on a 24-hour cycle rather than just a 12-hour kind of like cycle. And so what are the, and there's 10 beds I read, right?
Exactly.
That's right. So now from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., what does it look like? What are the programs? What are the services that are now being offered for the people who are staying at the shelter?
Well, we've definitely increased our care coordination. You made a great list of activities that our residents could engage in, but another activity is is just their case management. So their case management at time looks like coordinating that they're getting their medications, coordinating that their housing forms are in so that they can move into stable housing, making sure that they're seeing a therapist regularly. All of those things are now being done remotely, or, I mean, things are definitely safer. In March, it was kind of wild being in the metro. It was a completely different, I mean, I don't know if you've ever played like any kind of RPG games like Fallout 4 or
I grew up with Duke Nukem, but that was like on my old computer. We're talking like what was it? Gateway. It was on a Gateway.
Oh, wow.
Remember the ones that had the box that looked like a cow? So I played Duke Nukem. We're talking in like 3 pixels.
Yeah.
But that was it. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, it's just sort of just a different can of worms out there in New York City for a while there. I mean, I think it's really getting more normalized, seeing a lot more people commuting on the train, but the social rules were different in and of themselves on the train, the expectations of people and so forth. But I mean, I have to hand it to New York City. They did some things right. They opened up unused motels in the Upper West Side to make space for street homeless folks. They started cleaning the train cars because, as we have learned, COVID is an aerosol-based influenza, I suppose. So really, they turned a corner so that the rest of us could turn a corner. And in terms of our residents getting their services now, we are just more on top of them than we would have been. Like, spending more hours of the day means we're generating more dishes, means we need more food donations, we need more dinner donations, and we suddenly need masks and cleaning products. I mean, for a while, it was very difficult, very touch and go to make sure we had the things we need, but we're a private shelter, and we have been able to rely on the strength and the giving of our community, and it's what's got us this far.
Having lived in New York City, it's so interesting that when I ask you about how the city is, the first thing that you talk about is the transportation and then how that affects everything else, because that really is the main artery. Exactly. And that affects every single way of life, because whether you're going to school, whether you're going to work, whether you're going to, a doctor's appointment to see your case manager, you have to interact with the subway. And what are the hours right now, and how is that affecting the current New York homeless population? Because the subway is a place where people can kind of seek refuge, whether it's, especially in the winter when it gets really cold outside. And if it's snowing, for example, I'm going to take refuge, I'm going to take shelter in the subway. And so as it gets into the more colder months and we're getting into COVID, how are things going to continue to evolve as far as thinking about on a much larger scale, a little bit larger than, Trinity? What are the conversations around how we're going to be able to protect people as we go into this? Really, it's an unknown, right? There's so many known unknowns about the winter and COVID, and just what does that look like? What are the conversations that are being had on a, really grassroots level around how we can show up for people who are, on the streets at night?
I mean, I think it really comes down to compassion. If it's just going to be a you or me situation. I mean, like, I saw this woman be very upset that a man was laying down on the train car, and she was like, she wanted him to move so she could sit down, and I just was like, are you kidding me? Because, I mean, first of all, there's 10 more cars, madame. You could keep walking, and also, you have a place to sleep. Can you just let him alone? I mean, I think it comes down to compassion insofar as people really have to realize what they have and what others go without. If I had no privacy and I just can't imagine it would take very long for me to start behaving erratically. Just me as a person. I just know me. But so I guess what it comes down to is we don't know what people are going to do. There isn't a lot of policy line out there yet. As far as I know, they're not set up to close the motels, as I said, in the Upper West Side, but that hasn't stopped the homeowners association in that area from trying to make that happen, and Trinity Place Shelter has 10 beds, and we were one of the only shelters that took youth over the age of 21. Most youth shelters stopped at 21. Now, just recently, they passed this legislation called Raise the Age. So they raised it to 24, where we are. But if you think about it, if you're coming from a stable home and one of your caregivers has insurance, you can stay on that insurance until you're 26. But we kick young people out of the youth shelters at 24. And, Trump has been doing there's no one category where he's not being egregious, but I'd recently seen some legislation where they were talking about you could be able to identify trans folks in homeless shelters by looking for like an Adam's apple, say, on a trans feminine person. So, the world's out to get these folks in just every category possible. So it really comes down to compassion. And in terms of the grassroots of it all, I always tell folks that it takes a village and village people like us, because Trinity Place Shelter is open because it's the labor of love that it is.
The intentional cruelty from this administration especially, this has always been something that the conservative right has tried to make policy around, whether it's coded, there's always dog whistles. Like you're like,
Exactly.
Okay, well, we know exactly what you're doing there. But this administration, more than any other in the past, has come out especially against trans people's humanity.
Exactly.
And it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that with HUD moving forward. I read on the website, and we've talked about these numbers, but it's like out of the 8,000 LGBTQ youth currently living homeless in New York, there's only about max 350 beds. And it's awesome that you guys make up 10 of those beds. But even that, you're still only covering, less than 5% maybe of the need that's out there for this particular community, which, as you're saying, is from a societal level and a policy level is being marginalized. What do you think would be different under a different administration come November? And what are the types of things that you would like to see as far as policy around that? And I know New York City obviously has its own local policy, which may supersede some of the federal stuff. But what are policies that you would love to see enacted that would help especially support the LGBTQ community of people who are living on the streets?
Well, we need more beds, as you pointed out. Right now, there are just 2 places in the entire city, that has beds for folks over 21 who are LGBT.
How many total beds is that?
I don't know. There are only about 5 organizations that work with this population in our city, and those folks are reserving their beds for like the lower half of that, 18 to 21. So, it's a lot like the foster system. It's really easy to age out of it, and then there's just continues to be no support, so you continue to fall through the cracks. And so knowing that there are so few beds for this population, and specifically for queer youth, it's really important that those numbers increase. Not just because a lot of young queer people think New York is a safe place to be, so they seek it out, but also because a queer young person is much more likely to experience homelessness. Even though they make up only 7% of the population, they make up 40% of the homeless population.
And is that just in New York, or is that a national number?
That's national. Yeah, I'd really be interested in the statistics. But in terms of November, I am not convinced that a presidential change will matter. I really think it's important to invest in your local politics, who's running for the school board, who's running for city council. Those things really matter, and not just in places like New York City.
You talked about the struggles of the foster system and how those parallel the struggles of shelters that offer people who are living on the streets a chance to really get back on their feet. And so whether it's 21 or with Trinity, you're 24. So I'm part of the Trinity shelter, and my 24th birthday is coming up. And I also read that, I think, is this true, that Trinity, you can stay in the Trinity shelter up to 18 months as long as you're fulfilling the criteria, you're seeing your case manager. There's a certain list of Trinity criteria that people have to follow to be able to stay, but it's up to 18 months, right?
Right. So yes, most shelter stays are between 30 days or 90 days. So residents stay 6 times longer at Trinity Place Shelter. And what that really does is gets them into more of a routine. I mean, 3 months, that's the summer, right? Like
3 months is no time. 3 months is a flash in the pan. And just if everyone's like, oh, 3 months is a long time. Well, we've been in COVID twice that. And it's kind of, now that we're here on the other side and we're away from like March 50, like the Ides of March is when COVID really started to and people had to start to stay inside. It's been twice that. So 3 months is a flash in the pan, especially when you're trying to literally get back on your feet, create a financial base to then be able to go out, put down a security, put down first, maybe even a last or a half of a last, depending upon what the landlord wants, if that's what you're trying to do. And so I guess, if I'm 24 and I'm about to age out, what are the biggest obstacles? Is it getting money for my first month's rent? What are the biggest obstacles that you see, and how does Trinity Place try to show up for those people as they transition? Because it sounds like, because you do give up to 6 times more time within the program and the services and just the support. What's like the transition as people transition out of Trinity to be able to allow you guys to have such success compared with maybe other programs?
Well, I would say it comes down to our care coordination. You mentioned the criteria, but the criteria is really specific to every resident. So when they do intake, we talk about what their goals are. And they are also assigned a social worker. All of our overnight staff are social workers. So they're assigned a social worker who check in with them to make sure that they're making it to appointments, to, if something falls through the cracks, if they are in need of something that we can just grab for them off of Amazon or something, or if it comes down to something that someone could donate to us. That way we help them realize that they're not in this alone, because a lot of times these kids have been made to feel that way by the system and by the adults in their lives.
What is the average? Do people leave, for example, I'm at Trinity Place and I'm getting such great support that I may not even stay the 18 months. I may see that this opportunity is opening. How often does that happen? And what does that look like? And what spurs that? Is it someone getting a job? Is it someone finding a place in a more permanent shelter that has like you can stay here if you help out with us doing X, Y, or Z? What are the ways that people maybe leave before their time, which I think would definitely signal a success, no?
Sure. They're allowed to stay up till 18 months, but not everybody does. A lot of folks are trying to get into supportive housing. There's specific queer housing opportunities throughout the New York City area. Some people are trying to get housing vouchers. Some people are trying to get Social Security benefits or other kinds of aid from the city and national government. So it's a really individualized process. We wouldn't kick someone out because they turned 24. They have 18 months there. So it wouldn't matter if they came here on the eve before their 24th birthday. They could, that sounds pretty extreme. I'm not sure that that's ever happened, but what I do mean is we're a private shelter, so we are able to be flexible like that and work with our residents. Actually, every resident that's currently at the shelter, we've given them all extra time because they weren't really able to use, for a lot of COVID, we were like, please just stay home. Could you just hang out here?
From what I've seen from the videos and I was looking at pictures, it looks like a very open community area where people are sharing, when they're there, you're in is it like, I believe it's a basement of the Trinity Church. Is that right?
Right. And although we are housed in the church, we are not affiliated with the church. We are a secular shelter. Now, okay, so yes, it's in the basement of a church, but actually one of our interns, they arranged a donation. So they built these dividers for the residents, and they're made of PVC pipe and Gore-Tex, so they can be washed, and they provide a lot of privacy, I suppose. So we have these, when we were no residents had dividers when they were out of there at 8 o'clock in the morning. The routine was, I turn on the lights, I go out, I wake them up, they get their chore done, they fold up their bed, and I roll it into the closet, and then the space is used all day. And now they're hanging out mostly in their beds. We have a pretty good TV, so sometimes we're playing video games or watching a movie together. Definitely a community space, but we are socially distancing. It's large enough where all 10 of the beds can be, more than 6 feet apart. And like I said, we haven't had any COVID cases, but we have been able to isolate people when they either returned from a trip or were sick with something, because we have had a couple of colds.
Right. And that could be very difficult to kind of control in that environment where it is kind of, an open area. When people are now looking to transition out, and this is just a question I constantly rack my brain with, because we've always lived in a world that's kind of like the Matrix, certain people have access to certain resources, certain people don't have access to resources. And it's like moving forward, those who can have access to jobs where they can sit at home, use their laptop and log on as we are kind of talking on Skype, they're going to potentially have more access to opportunity for higher paying jobs, or maybe have a different type of job security depending upon what happens in the future, if there's another pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a push, or is there talk about, how can we provide resources for people in the shelter to be able to try to get those jobs, get different opportunities that would maybe go away from other traditional things? Sure. One of the things that we also spoke about before we started to record was trades. You had mentioned that you have friends still back in Massachusetts that are in the trades. And I have to say, this is a conversation I've had with my friend who runs his own tile company for years. He's like, more people should be in the trades. The trades in general in the United States has had a complete fallout, because for the last 20 years, it's like, if you don't go to college, then you can't make money. And then this horrible stigma around the trades. And so it's been interesting to see that in COVID, many of the people that went to college to get these jobs at X, Y, and Z were now all of a sudden non-essential, whereas construction and the trades have been essential the entire time. And so are there talks about like how we can basically COVID-proof Trinity community members as they transition outside of, Trinity Place Shelter? Because I think that's, and this is just also something that's everyone's having, right? How can I have a pandemic-proof situation moving forward? Because more and more people, I think it's like 33% more people have gone to work from their homes, which obviously implies a lot of things, right? If you can work from home, it implies that you have a home. Then it implies that you can pay your Wi-Fi bill. Then it implies that you have the equipment to be able to do that. You also maybe have a quiet area. You have someone who's helping with your childcare because your child needs support now that they're not going to school. It implies a lot of things, and it really comes down to financial resources at the end of the day. And so I'm wondering what Trinity is doing to maybe say, okay, I see that you wanted to do this job. Have you thought about this job? Because moving forward, that will be something that's pandemic proof, whether that's in the trades or, I don't know, I'm just throwing stuff out here, but it's like doing some type of online marketing or providing some type of a VA assistance. It's just been interesting to see many of my friends during COVID see it as a time of opportunity to be able to kind of pivot and do something that they always wanted to do. But hey, now they're at home, and now they're not commuting to work 30 or 45 minutes in the morning and 30 or 45 minutes in the afternoon. So they're going online and they're kind of diving deeper into a project that may allow them to create money in a different, more non-traditional way. But now during COVID seems like, okay, that's awesome. You can make money online doing that or that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We definitely are interested in workforce development options. We do work with Canva and NADAP. Another really great program in the city is new, non-traditional employment for women. They are actually construction workers. Yeah, I would say that they have, sometimes I see advertisements for like coding boot camps for Black trans women, and that is part of our demographics. So yes, if my resident identifies as those things and is also interested in coding, then certainly I can guide them towards that, and we do. But it can be really hard in these workforce development programs. In a lot of these trade situations, homophobia is a real problem. And if you're going to show up for a class where you're getting picked on because you're not pretending to be straight, or you're not, you're gender non-conforming, or people can tell you're queer for whatever reason. And sometimes the teacher doesn't stop it, sometimes either because they don't know how to manage it or because they agree. And, it can be an unwelcoming space for these queer young people. That's not to say that they can't make the space and are not brave or something, but the trades area needs to be more inclusive and needs to be less bigoted and homophobic if they want my residents to work there. I think it would be great. I would be making so much more money right now if I had gone into carpentry or plumbing or even house painting.
It's interesting how that works out, how you're sold the bill of goods that go to college, do X, Y, and Z, and then it will lead down a certain path. And all along, especially our generation, we were just literally, I would say that's the best way, we were sold a different bill of goods. We were given a different path forward towards what people in society would deem as, they're doing good, right? Which is a whole different conversation. Maybe,
sure,
but you're totally right. Obviously, the trades, the construction industry is more conservative, I'd say, which is a nice way of, I guess, putting it.
It's gentle. It's gentle of you.
That was a diplomatic touch to that.
It's diplomatic. Yeah. I mean, it just needs to be more inclusive. I really stress that when an organization like CAMBA or NADAP approaches us and says, hey, we'd like to tell your residents about this program, my first conversation's always about, well, how is the classroom management? How are my residents going to feel? Because I'm not going to put them in a situation where they are made to feel less than, because they don't need that as a barrier to their success.
If we're talking about the trades as maybe a place that's not as queer welcoming, for example, what is an industry that is extremely welcoming? And is there any one industry that you can point to and say, yeah, we love sending our residents into this type of work in this type of industry because we know that they're not going to be, treated differently just for who they are?
I wouldn't say that I know of a specific industry that I've been like, wow, I sent like 5 residents to that. I mean, I've been with Trinity Place Shelter for, 2.5, 3 years. So I maybe don't have the longer view that my director would have, having been there for 12. But I could say that I have high hopes for the tech sector, because if we have different kinds of programmers, we're going to unearth different kinds of biases in the way we have code written in general. But then also you can be more solitaire, so you can A, work from home, B, not have to put up with microaggressions of fools. So yeah, I'm always trying to encourage my residents to go more towards tech, more towards coding. If there's a boot camp happening, I'm putting it in somebody's face. So, but again, also, I love the organization Non-Traditional Employment for Women. They work in the city, and I love partnering with them, and I love being able to send residents there because they do good work.
Yeah, I'm going to look them up. They sound really impressive. And what does your day-to-day look like now, especially in the COVID world, where I would assume in the past you would do the night shift, but now during the day, are you doing days? Are you doing nights? Are you strictly on nights? And if so, why? What are the interactions? What's the support? Because you have to be distanced, but also at the same time offer support, which I think is just a very interesting world that we're living in. No matter what job or sector you're in, being distanced but offered support feels impersonal, just even saying it.
Right. Well, I have 2 roles at Trinity Place Shelter, and one of them is a program manager position, and that really deals with volunteer management. So people reach out when they would like to donate dinner. That's pretty easy to do. People reach out when they would like to have some friends come to do volunteer work, or their organization come and do a volunteer day. So pre-COVID, I was managing a lot of that. We were very strict about the kind of volunteers we let onto the premises. We understand that everybody wants to help out, and we love that, but we need folks who can teach us about taxes. Help me with my taxes, help me with my CV, help me with passing this stats class. Direct things and direct skills are really what we really need from our volunteers. Now, right now, I've had one volunteer come on to the premises and give us haircuts, and that's really been the only person who has been on the property. But the office is actually separate from the undercroft, so I don't wear a mask when I'm in the office by myself, but I do wear a mask when I'm anyplace else in the shelter, and the residents wear a mask if they're going to be interacting with us or away from their bed. And I don't find it more difficult to provide care or caring. I think that, I do a check-in with everybody at least once just to see how they're doing, how they've been since my last shift. because I said I work as a program manager, but I also do overnight shifts. I do my overnight shifts on Friday night and Monday night, and those go until 10 o'clock the next day. I have been doing some day shifts because we all have been doing some day shifts. It's just what works best for everybody's scenario. The social workers who work for the shelter have second jobs, so they may take a day shift if they do not have to be on site at their job. And we've been lucky that has been the case for all of the pandemic so far. So we're just really just picking up the slack. We're a team. I think we all feel like a family. I mean, I get real mama bear when I think about my cubs. I mean, I'm not like, I'm not a lot older than them or anything, but I do love the opportunity to like come in with some cookies I made, or maybe we'll do a family style meal all together. And during Christmas, or the holidays, we decorated cookies and we watched The Grinch and stuff. And I think we do a lot to make sure that they still feel cared for and important.
I work with a bunch of nonprofits. I consult with them. I've worked around. And you mentioned something that I just think is so central to a really successful, however you want to define that, nonprofit, which is being selective around who you let near the campfire and who you say no to. Because for nonprofits, the nonprofits that know to say no more than they say yes, those are the ones that I think those are the ones that offer the best programs and services to the demographics that they're working with.
Yeah. And that's what's really, it's really from a client care perspective, because a lot of people, they want to help out because they want to feel good and they want to help out just for that. And while that has its own value, because maybe they share that on their social media and now it elevates our voice in some way, which is really cool. But it's a lot. We're a grassroots organization. We're very small. It actually takes a lot of work and resources to give someone that feel good sensation of I helped out. So we really need to make sure that it really benefits our clients directly. Yeah. The way SAT prep can.
The way taxes can. The way CV help can.
Exactly.
And so looking at, as you get, more into the winter, because I was looking on the website and I was trying to figure out what are the things that Trinity currently needs. And it's very interesting also that you're like, hey, don't give us all these clothes. We just want fresh socks, fresh underwear, certain types of things.
Right.
What are, because there's definitely some listeners in the New York area and maybe they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, the way the world of Kevin, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, everyone knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Right. So what are people that are you looking for a hairdresser in a month, or will the hairdresser or barber come back who helped out? What types of support that is like from human capital are you currently looking for? And more importantly, because maybe I could offer something, could they also offer this via Zoom, via distance? If it were like a CV help, if it were something like that, what are the things that are most in need now?
All right. So just try to think back. You're 21. You want to sleep with your free time. And we get that. So getting the kids motivated, that's the first hurdle. I think we have a great relationship with our barber, Reggie. He's got a salon in Soho if you want to check him out. But yeah, I think we're going to continue to work with him. He's really cool. So in terms of what we're really needing, Pride Month is where we get a lot of our donations, where we get a lot of our event dollars, and that didn't happen this year. So things like a toiletry drive where you just go to your communities and collect shampoos and deodorants, that could be very useful. We have things on our Amazon wish list that folks could buy. Maybe you want to prepare a meal for 10 people. We can make that happen and we would really appreciate it. If you can remember being that age, I mean, you might just have a bowl of cereal because it's easier than like making a meal, so you could really help a group of young people out for an evening by ordering us a pizza or two. That really goes a long way. We need cleaning supplies and we need masks right now. So a mask drive, maybe somebody who makes masks, that'd be cool. I mean, those are the things that folks that we really are looking out for. Toiletries, cleaning supplies, masks, because they go a long way at keeping us all safe.
When you say masks, could it be like a bandana, or are you saying just like a mouth covering, or are you looking for the more traditional kind of like surgery masks?
Oh, they can be cloth masks. The data I've seen on the neck.
The gaiters,
bandanas.
Yeah, the gaiters everyone saw that article, I think, that came out that was like, it's actually splitting up the aerosols into smaller particles as people breathe. And that's why people loved it, because they're like, oh, I can breathe and I can go on a jog with it. It's like, it's probably not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So,
yeah, we don't need surgical masks right now. I mean, we'll see when the second wave hits. If folks can hook us up with like cleaning supplies, paper towels, bleach, spray cleaners, that sort of thing, or cloth masks, hand sanitizers, things that really, the daily usage stuff. If someone wants to buy groceries for us, we really appreciate that too, because I mean, as you can imagine, we're, while we were providing dinner and groceries like for the weekend, we're now providing, 7 days a week worth of groceries for 10 young people.
Right. So that's tripled or something like that.
Yeah,
it's really
exactly.
Increased overnight. Okay. Where can people find Trinity Place? There's the website. I know about you. I've been following you on Instagram.
Yeah.
If I want to reach out and say, hey, this is what I want to send you, this is what I want to give you, what's the best way for people, to contact you?
Well, the website does have a really great page, ways to help, and it'll redirect you to like either myself, that's Erin at trinityplaceshelter.org. That's my email address there. But if you just want to help, but through volunteering, because you have a specific skill or thing that like about financial literacy, or maybe you work in HR, so you have tricks on how to do well during interviews, anything like that. Or if you're in the New York area and you say, hey, I wish that my organization were helping out organizations like this, like you can do a volunteer day with us. And we try to make that interesting for you and productive. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, but the website's probably the easiest. And like you said, we do have an Instagram page, and I'm updating that all the time with fun memes.
Yes,
I guess, let me see.
You have a lot of memes.
I'm out here.
I love a good meme game.
It's Trinity's _place is the handle for our shelter. We weren't able to like really hop on there and get all three of the same things because
same handles. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not far from our grassroots roots at all. But again, that's why I keep coming back to saying it's a labor of love, because everybody who works there does it because we really know that it's an essential and important feature that, our city needs and that these young people need. The
website is trinityplaceshelter.org. And you can always reach out to Erin at trinityplaceshelter.org if you have any questions. I will also add this in the description on the post on Instagram. So you can go to Wifi Water Podcast Instagram and you'll be able to then connect in case you can't find it. Erin, thank you for sharing with us about Trinity. I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and so it's great that I was able to learn more. So thank you for being on.
Thank you. We love what you do at Wi-Fi and Water. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wi-Fi and Water. If you liked it, wherever you're listening to this podcast, subscribe and review. This just makes it easier for other people to help find our podcast. The algorithm thing. We can be found on Instagram and Facebook at Wi-Fi and Water Podcast. Reach out if you'd like to be a guest or have an idea for a future episode. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.